and this is the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting for the School District of Waukesha Board of Education. Can we first verify that the meeting was properly posted?
Yes.
Thank you, Stacy. Our first item of business is approval of the teaching and learning minutes from the January 2nd, 2024 meeting.
A motion to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Zenobia. Any questions, comments, or modifications? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstaining? Okay, passes 5-0. Thank you. We have an opportunity for public comments this evening, for which I misplaced my script. Just give me a second. I've almost got it. All right, we have one speaker tonight who will be allowed up to 5 minutes to complete their comments. We'll notify the speaker at 3 minutes to begin to wrap up. We expect all speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language, and be respectful in their comments. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board or committee meetings. Speakers are here to address the board, not the audience. The school board and this committee does not endorse any comments made by members of the community here tonight. We'd like to remind our community members of the impact of their words on others and that our children are watching. We commit to communicating with you in respectful and productive ways and ask that you do the same. We also expect that the audience will be respectful of the speaker and of the board and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or other behavior that will detract from the meeting. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience. Visual aids cannot be used in the area behind the speaker and podium should be clear during public comment. Also, in order to respect our speaker this evening and our meeting participants, please silence your cell phone at this time. Our speaker tonight is Paul Reese.
Good evening. I wanted to thank this board and for all the hard work it's done. It's made some difficult decisions lately. You should be commended for that. It's not easy to make education both engaging and substantive. I wanted to get that right because it's a difficult thing, and to keep kids who want to be off doing other things engaged and put meat in education and give them something to learn. It's difficult, and this board has really worked towards that. Something that kind of set me off last month at the meeting was when Diane said that education is always evolving, and it's something I've heard so often, that there's always this evolution towards education, which to me as a parent, it says to me you're experimenting. You're experimenting on my kid. You're not teaching them, you're experimenting. You're trying to see what sticks to the wall. And I don't appreciate that when I hear that, and I feel that that's the way it was done. My daughter was in STEM. Now, it's not quite a personalized learning plan, but it's pretty close. And there was a project in there that we did, and it was out of cardboard. We had to come in for the day. I took a day off of work, and we had to build stuff out of cardboard. And there was this big collaboration where we had to do all this stuff, and they got these groups together from every grade level, and we took the time and piled up cardboard and broke up so there's so many kids from each grade level, it's multiple grade levels, but each level there, and to work on this project. And so they started doing it, and they go about doing it, and it was making like carnival games type thing. And they went about doing it, and they just piled up cardboard, and there wasn't much direction, and we sort of watched a video on type of what they kind of look like, and some kids did some things and some kids didn't. And at the end of the day, I'm like, well, what are they going to learn? Something, are you going to teach them like how cardboard is stronger in some direction with the perforations and what causes it to be stronger or anything like that? Is there going to be something in here that's going to be substantive? They are engaged, no doubt, but there's not much substance here. And at the end of the day, I was told, well, it's to get them to learn how to collaborate, to work together as a team, to teammate and understand and work together. And I kept my mouth shut, but the thing that popped into my mind, you mean like kickball? Because isn't that what kids do when you play baseball and that? You work together? You have to figure out what a strike zone is, or you're gonna stand there and argue over it one all day, you know? So there's all sorts of things that kids already do to learn to work together, but they need substantiveness and in substance in their learning. And that's what I felt lacked when I was doing that type of thing. And I moved my daughter to a different school. But, and I don't mean to beat that horse about it, because
2 minutes.
it's, you took care of it. But when you do something like that and you have many ways, many projects to do, it becomes real hard to evaluate. And you're asking a lot for teachers who have a difficult job, it is enough, to evaluate every different person on their own when you have nothing compared to. There's, teachers, they learn a lot about teaching, but they don't know a lot about everything. You know, there's the old say, jack of all trades, master of none. You know, I'm a machinist, like, when you're building stuff like that, do you understand how I-beams work and that? Do you understand how strength it works? And I know I'm going off, okay, Kelly, but how things work, and kids don't understand, you know, and you can't expect the teacher to understand all these things. You know, an I-beam strength is on the stretching and crushing of the two flats. The beam holds them apart and you're stretching one and you're crushing the other. And you have to teach kids stuff like that, and it's an engagement, and I can't expect every teacher to know everything about stupid things like that, you know? And when you have projects that don't have substance, and they're just doing it to do it, it always seemed like a waste of time, and this board is correcting it. It's working on correcting that. I think the stuff that you're investing in is a good move. We're moving things where it is engaging. You're working on making education engaging in our school and to help our kids
30
succeed later
seconds.
on in life. Anyways, thanks.
All right, moving into our content areas. So we are going to be blinded with science tonight, so it's all science all day long. We have our high school science team that's joining us at the table, and we have some curricular resources that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, so as the team gets settled, I'll just give a little brief introduction. I know it seems like a long time ago, but it was just September earlier this year that the team came forward and talked about the curriculum design process and how current courses that are required as part of graduation, we currently do not have a guaranteed and viable curriculum for those courses. More specifically, the group's been working on biology, chemistry, and physics. So tonight is really that next step, but as we were planning the agenda, we thought, wow, September seemed like yesterday, but it also seemed like a long time ago. So in the presentation that was provided, there's a little historical reference as to what was shared previously as part of their process, but tonight they're here just to share a little bit more information and discussion, and in the future, potentially an action item.
Hi, I'm Erica. I'm the science coordinator for the district. And like Jen said, we're going to talk a little bit about the 3 courses and the resources that we went through with a pilot and what we're going through for recommendation. As we said before, right now we do not have a curricular resource for our 3 core science classes. So we really needed to find a resource that met the needs of our students and our staff so that they could be supported in the science skills and processes. As we went through the pilot process, the resource we are looking for recommendation for is the Inspire Science series. As you recall, we were piloting different resources for different courses, and luckily for me, it worked out that they all picked the same publisher, so we are going through one series, which will be really nice for the students. We didn't require them to pick one series because we wanted to make sure that we were meeting the needs of that specific course with those content areas being pretty discrete from each other. But it worked out that this was the best resource for all 3 of those courses. So these books will be used for biology and honors biology, chemistry and honors chemistry, and then physics. AP Physics has its own textbook that is used for that course. Some key features for this resource is it's phenomenological, meaning that it starts with an experience or an idea that students are engaged in, and they're understanding why that experience occurs. It's 3-dimensional, meaning that they're learning their skills, their communication, and their content all together. It follows a storyline, and most importantly, it comes in the Spanish language as well for our students, as we do teach dual language in science classes in high school. It also provided that access to extension. If we're going to be using the same textbook for a grade level course and an honors course, we wanted to make sure it had those opportunities for resources for analysis, computational thinking, and other and deeper content areas. And most importantly, that it had a grade level text for our students to access. We wanted to make sure students are reading science text at grade level, but it also provides the scaffolds and supports to help students reach that text. As we went through the pilot process, we made sure that we were really looking at teacher and student survey data. We looked at a resource review decision-making tool, and then we went through a voting process. So the resource decision-making tool had both of the resources side by side and analyzing the rubric that DPI puts out for science resources, which was created from the NGSS standards. So the people who wrote the standards created a tool, and then we used that tool to help identify what is the best resource and making sure we're meeting the needs we needed. After we went through that process together, the teachers all had a vote to determine what they felt was the best resource. You could see it was unanimous for biology and chemistry, and then we did have one person who preferred the other resource in physics, but overall it was a general consensus to choose the Inspire series for all 3 courses. Besides just collecting the data around the survey, we had a lot of feedback from the teachers on different areas, and here are just a few quotes of things that they felt were really highlights of the Inspire series, and these are from all 3 courses. They really liked that there was an e-format, but it was also PDF, so if students are somewhere without internet, they still have access on their iPad. The curriculum has a nice cohesion in terms of it's a spiraling curriculum. It made sense. It wasn't just new content, not pulling from the unit before it. And that it had a lot of language supports built into it, as well as notebooking and all these other things that we're already doing, but it's built into the resource for them. We also made sure to gather student feedback, which the last quote on here is my favorite because it really speaks to what a high school student is going to think about a science textbook. I mean, no one's really like, woo, I want to read it. But they felt they actually learned something from it, which to me is a winning statement from a student. They liked the web-based resources. They felt that the feedback tools that they had, they could do quizzes right on in the program and it would give them the answers right away, and that they could really kind of know where they were going. They also had the notebooking assignments that were both digital or print, depending on how the teacher or the student wanted to use. But overall, the students also preferred this resource. If we move forward with this, the goal will be to launch in the summer with training for our teachers, as well as training during our August teacher PD days, and then in February when we have our other district day. Not only that, but we'll be having our monthly district PLCs during their common prep over WebEx, which is really nice that we have that time to come together and kind of check with each other, make sure that we're on the same page. I also embed, as well as the building coaches, into the PLCs at the schools to make sure that we're supporting them as they're going through this process. And then as we go and use our common assessments, we'll check the data from those common assessments, see where we're at, is what we're doing working, and if not, making adjustments as we go through that process. So for all 3 courses, the total cost of the books will be about $263,000. And that is classroom sets for our middle schools, as well as our 3 high schools for biology, and then classroom sets for chemistry and physics at all 3 high schools. Teachers editions for everyone, and then an 8-year digital license for our students. And then there's an extra budget set aside to ensure that we have the lab equipment that we need for all of these resources. It's a little bit different at each school, so we're going to go through and do an audit, see what we need, as well as adding the Vernier software to our program so that our physics students have that software that it's needed for this curriculum as well. So that is it. Any questions for me?
Mrs. Koenig?
Yeah, I took a look at the books. They do look amazing. I mean, I'm not I'm not a lover of science, but if I was a high school kid, I would really, I wish I would have had books like that. That was much more engaging. One comment I saw that one of the students made, or maybe more made this, is the website and resources can be finicky, and had some weird bugs and things like that. Are those things that you're able to, or have you addressed with the publisher? I mean,
Yeah,
is something across.
a lot of that was from the piloting, so when we don't have the full access, it gets a little finicky on some of the sharing abilities, but McGraw-Hill was actually really responsive. They had a Google Doc that teachers would put questions in, and their reps would respond right away, and we were able to fix it as we went.
Oh, that's great. Okay, good to hear. Thank you.
Mrs. Kozlowski.
So I'm just looking at the pie charts. How many teachers did we have actually piloting this?
So it depended on the course. I'll go back to that one. For biology, we had 8 teachers who fully piloted to fidelity, including the 2 middle school teachers, one at Les Paul and one at Butler. For physics, we had 6, and for chemistry, we had 5. We made sure that all teachers had the ability to use the resources if they were teaching it. But in order to vote, they had to do the full pilot to fidelity. All schools were represented pretty equally, and our dual language teachers were also part of that process.
And they all responded? Okay. It just took me a while to try to figure out what the top graphs were.
It was the schools that they were from.
Okay. And then the questions are, do they combine the charts on the top and the bottom?
The bottom was this, what was your choice for the resource? So the top was the schools for that one, for that course, and then, so was biology on the left,
Got it.
chemistry in the middle, physics on the right.
No, I just wanted to make sure that everyone was responding and
Yes.
having their voice heard.
Yes, everyone who
What we-
started was able to,
Okay.
yes.
That's good. Thank you.
Mr. Borowski.
Yes, just curious, I think I know the answer to this, but, obviously, or I'm assuming that each text stands on its own for its course. Is there any advantage to having them from the same publisher, possible cross-subject connections between the 3 sciences, or even from a pricing standpoint for the district? I'm just curious if
From a
there's any
pricing standpoint,
advantage.
yes, it does give us a little bit of a bulk discount. And then it also is easier for the students as they transition from class to class. They'll understand the system and they know how it works a little bit easier.
Sure, okay.
I would also add for data setup and system integration, obviously when you have 1 versus 3, that's less workload for our technology and ITC team, and for teachers to know multiple systems. Kind of complete opposite of what we were just talking about for student services with our work in Infinite Campus. That's another piece when we have 1.
Thank you.
Mr. Zenobia.
Thank you. So I know we've had this conversation around all of our textbooks as we've gone through this over the past year and a half or so in regards to we're choosing textbooks that are dual language. And so in this case, how many other resources were looked at? I don't know if we went over that.
We looked at about 10 total before we narrowed it down to the 2. And in fact, in chemistry, one of the ones we piloted was not in Spanish, but we felt that it was far superior to the other ones that were available in Spanish. We'd always use that as a important factor, but not the only deciding factor.
Of those 10, did they all offer it?
Very few.
So did you say 2, or was it?
Only a couple offered it in Spanish.
Okay.
It's a pretty rare thing in the high school level, especially in sciences. Most of the middle school and elementary resources are starting to come in Spanish, but unfortunately not in the high school sciences.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a bunch of, just some little questions. I wanted to make sure that I'm following everything. So, one of the things I think you mentioned, I just wanted to clarify that we obviously have an AP Physics book. We also have AP Biology and AP Chem, and they have separate texts too, right?
Correct.
They're all separate, and we approve those separately. I know with the AP classes, we're required to have a textbook available if the students want them. And I noticed just the volumes that are being requested of these texts. So for biology and chemistry, I'm seeing the same request, but for physics, there's a smaller number of the online subscription, but the same number of hard copy texts. But I know physics is a requirement for graduation. So I'm just curious why the difference of 150 physics subscriptions versus biology and chemistry.
Because students can take AP Physics 1 as an option for the graduation requirement, so not every student will take grade level physics. They might take
Okay.
AP Physics 1, so it kind of
That makes
lessens the number of
sense.
students.
So biology and chemistry are different. They're going to take honors biology or honors chemistry or regular, and then they take the AP
Correct.
classes. So that's in addition to.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a love of science right there.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That actually explains that. And then related to that, with the online, are we paying for seats up front, or are we paying ultimately what we need? So it's 8 years of licenses for that many students. Like, what does that look like if we don't need that many?
So I looked into that, and if we purchased fewer 8-year licenses, thinking we might have less students at that time, in buying like a 3-year license for a certain number, the math works out that it's actually still cheaper to buy 8 years for all of the students versus like working out the math, so we were paying for the exact correct number of students because of the bulk license process.
Okay, that makes sense. We kind of know what's coming.
Yeah.
So I think we can kind of see that
Yeah.
bolus coming. And it looks like for those students who are going to take biology in middle school, they're getting all the same resources.
Correct.
The electronic plus the access to the textbooks. After those licenses run out, the textbooks are still ours, but we would then need to re-up whatever those.
Yes, the
licenses are.
digital.
We
And at that point, my guess is there'd be a whole new addition to the book
Yeah.
as well.
So it looks like it's a 2020 edition. I mean, I don't think biology and chemistry are changing rapidly, so.
Chemistry doesn't
just
change too
different
often, no.
formats, yeah. I will say, and just in terms of the content of the books themselves, and Ms. Gennerman was kind enough to give me a teacher's edition of the book, so I had to use a magnifying glass to read the actual book. But there was, I'm getting older. The content in the Inspire books, I felt was significantly better than the other book that you guys piloted. And I know that not everybody uses the hard text, but I felt like the quality of the book was better, the printing was better, the indexing was significantly better, and I know that's something that students use a lot, is kind of flipping to the back and trying to find those topics relatively quickly. And so it did seem like the one that you're recommending is more crisp and it's easier to kind of flow through. And from a content perspective, like I said, it doesn't change a lot, but I didn't feel like there was a lot of like derivatives and kind of going down in some different topics that might distract from kind of the core concept. So I felt like it was actually a really good set of texts. And I also potentially, I noticed that there was one person that potentially disagreed on the physics, and I would say that maybe was the one that was not as great as the other two, but I still think that it flows really nicely from the other two, so that makes sense for students that are going to flow right into the traditional physics class. It seems like that's a logical decision versus picking something else at that point.
Yeah, and really the physics one, the other choice was a very different style of teaching physics, which if that's your preferred method, that's the kind of book you're going to want to pick.
So once these texts are introduced, is there going to be a significant change in the laboratory strategies, or do those pieces stay the same, or is that being reworked as well?
So almost everything is kind of being reworked. So that's kind of the tandem work we've been doing right now, is looking at the learning targets. Right now, our learning targets are like content is separate from skills, which is separate from communication. And we know from our research that those should be done three-dimensionally and together, so we're doing those. The common lab experiences don't change too much. Everyone does the flame test lab in chemistry, and they'll continue to do the flame test lab in chemistry. But we're making sure that the common assessment, the writing piece that goes with it, is updated to meet the standards that we need to be meeting. So those things will be changing. Our assessments will be changing. We'll have common assessments, which will be exciting. So that's the work that we're doing this spring and summer.
Okay. That's great. That's all I have. Anything else? So process-wise, what do we need to know?
Tonight was just to bring it back for discussion since they've kind of been along on this journey. And then we'll bring it back and continue the conversation. And if everyone's comfortable, consider approval for the resource moving forward. And then from there, the team will start putting into motion some of those potential plans for summer and professional development.
So they would be in use potentially next fall?
Correct.
Okay, it's a heavy lift.
All right.
Great. Anything else? All right, thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
the pilot team for all the work, pilot teams, I should say. What's going on there? All right, we are moving into other business, and we have a really important topic tonight. We're going to have an update on Act 20 and all the things happening around elementary reading.
Yeah, so as everyone gets situated and we get the screens up and rolling, I'll just give a little introduction. So some of you may have heard of Act 20 that has come into place. We have a team that's been really working hard on ensuring that we are aligned. And I want to just give kudos to the team that's here and everyone that's working alongside them and on all of our different teams that you hear about. One of the great things that you hear about tonight is really that this is just a next step in our work in our elementary literacy instruction. We've already been doing some of this work along the way prior to Act 20. So I'll turn it over to Melissa Yao, who has not been at a teaching and learning meeting in quite some time, so welcome back. She's our Director of Elementary Teaching and Learning, so welcome back, and then you can introduce everyone else.
Thanks for having me tonight. I have with me Carly Solberg, Principal of Prairie Elementary, and Emily, sorry, it echoes back here, so I think I'm loud, and Emily Freeman, who is our Elementary Coordinator of Literacy. All right, so with Act 20, we have a task force that we have put together to make sure that we are well represented and have a team of people who can work to carry out all that needs to be done in these initial stages as we work to put a lot of things that need to be in place for next school year. So myself, Emily, and Carly are on the team, as well as Lisa Lawrence, Dee Garcia, Wendy Hamilton, Hadassah Robinson, Jenny Restock, and Karina Massey. So you'll see literacy coaches, principals, special education, monolingual, dual language, so a well-represented team. This team gets together now. We're getting together weekly as we work on many of these key pieces that you'll hear about tonight. So our key points and goals of this team is to make sure that we stay up to date on the changes and timelines that the state is requiring in this law. We are wanting to make sure that we are coordinated in our efforts and that we are systematic in our approach. We want to make sure that teachers are going to be supported in this work as well through all the different implementations. So there's curricular implementation as well as new and refined learning that we will all be taking place in. And then our ultimate goal always is to make sure that our students have higher levels of achievement. So Act 20 was passed this past summer in July, on July 20th. And the goal of this law is to make sure that there is a comprehensive update to the current literacy instruction. And the state wants to make sure that the practices that are in the state of Wisconsin are science-aligned early reading instruction. And so the goal of this law was to improve reading and literacy here in the state for K-12 students. As you know, we've talked about our data in the state. We've looked at it many times here in the district, and currently students aren't meeting the rate of proficiency that we would want. So in the state, based on the NAEP, only 67% of students in fourth grade are proficient, and our forward also shows that by 58%. 98% are proficient. And so we want to change those outcomes for students, not only on these assessments, but also as they're going out into different professions. So this is the law, the bill, and if you like reading law, you'll enjoy reading this. We have read it many times, and so tonight what we tried to do is break down some of these different points for you that the law is requiring for, especially what is for next year. So there's some additional pieces that we'll bring back to you that aren't for next year, but later in the future. So we're starting with what we need to have in place for next year. And as I mentioned earlier, we talked about that the law states that we need to be science aligned. And what does that mean? What does science-based literacy instruction mean? It means that we need to make sure that we are explicit and systematic in 9 areas of literacy, which include phonological awareness, phonemic awareness, phonics, building background knowledge, oral language development, vocabulary building, instruction in writing, instruction in comprehension, and instruction in reading fluency. As you know, we've been on the journey already in the school district on improving in many of these areas. We have focused on our phonological phonemic awareness through our new phonics program and phonics, and then also writing instruction. And so we'll talk a little bit more about how these other 9 areas need to be in our comprehensive program. Although we do reach a lot of them, we've taken a great look at what we're currently doing in areas that we need to strengthen. So part of the work that we have been doing in the district before Act 20 came is we knew that the outcomes for our students in literacy weren't where we needed to be. And as I mentioned, we've been working in elementary on bringing new curriculum and refining our learning and understanding of how we get better outcomes in early literacy for students. And we've also been doing that at our middle and high school with adopting new curricular resources. And so last year we wanted to continue to work on that. So we partnered with CISA 6, and we have a group who is in an early literacy academy and a group who is in K-12 Institute for Leading for Literacy. And so our team created a vision because we want to create a strategic reading plan for the district, but we needed to be grounded in what's our vision for our students. And so we came up with this together. The School District of Waukesha commits to implementing rigorous, science-aligned universal instruction and intervention systems to ensure all students become critical readers, writers, and communicators for personal, academic, and professional success. And we wanted to be clear that this is for all students, no matter which school you attend, no matter which program you might be in, no matter if you might have an IEP or do not have an IEP. We want this for all of our students. And how are we going to do this? We are going to do this through the implementation of instruction at the universal level and for those layers of support through intervention and acceleration. And our goal, once again, is that every student would become a critical reader, writer, and communicator.
So Act 20 has a lot of different parts to it, and so part of our work has been really figuring out what are the different parts, what are the requirements, where are we already aligned, and where are some shifts needed. So tonight we're really going to talk to you about a few key parts that we know about and that have implications for next school year already. The first one being K-3 curriculum. So Melissa talked with you about the 9 components of science-aligned reading instruction. Act 20 does mandate that district curriculum has to include all 9 components of science-aligned reading instruction beginning for next school year. And you have to show how you have systematic and explicit instruction in those 9 areas. There is a team that is put together at the state level that is in the process of reviewing curriculum and putting together a list based on a rubric they created of curriculums that they say meet all 9 of those components. We are not required to choose a curriculum from that list. You just have to show that you have those 9 components. But we were already planning on a literacy or a reading curriculum review next school year. This has kind of just moved our timeline up a little bit. And so we will be coming back to you next month to tell you more about where we are in that curriculum review process. We're staying tightly in line with those review process meetings to see the latest information that is coming out, and the list should be coming out hopefully in March from the state level. The other thing that is new is no MSV, and it's another education acronym. What it stands for is meaning, structure, and visual. The intention of MSV when it was first created was really for it to be a teacher tool to look at what kids were doing as readers, to see what sources of information they were using to read words. Were they using the meaning of the text? Were they using sentence structure? Or were they using visual? And visual was intended to mean the letters on the page. Over time, it has unfortunately often come to mean using the pictures, which leads kids to guessing the words. And science tells us, and we know that that is not how we want kids to be reading words. We really need them to be word solving based on what they know about phonics. And so the no MSV prohibition begins in fall. So that says that we cannot have curriculum that teaches any MSV strategies. We also cannot be prompting kids. So if you were reading with a student and they come to a word they don't know, our prompting needs to be something that leads them to the word and looking at the letters, sounding it out, putting the sounds together that they know. So your prompting must be for decoding first. We can still use meaning and structure to confirm that that word is correct, and for comprehension, because we do know that the purpose of reading is to make meaning. So we don't want to strip meaning away from reading, but when kids are reading text, we need them to be reading the words and using the letters in the words to read those words. Another thing that the bill requires is professional learning. That is an exciting thing to be included, I think, because we know that the resources that teachers have are super, super important, but their knowledge is really what is going to make the difference with that curriculum. And so this bill requires learning about what science-aligned reading instruction is and what that actually looks like with students. There is a requirement for teacher learning, and that teacher learning is for all K-3 general ed teachers, special education teachers, as well as coaches. That for teachers must begin by July 2025. We have decided in Waukesha that we are going to be training all of our teachers K-5, knowing that teachers move grade levels, and also knowing that our 4th and 5th grade teachers can really benefit from those science-aligned practices as well to serve the students that come to their classrooms. Our principals have to have a training that also covers that information, but that is specific for principals and how you lead and guide those changes in your building. The principals have to complete their training by July 1st, 2025. There are lists in the bill. The list for teachers comes from the Center for Effective Reading Instruction that outlines what the approved programs are for professional development for teachers. And then there is a list within Act 20 that says what the approved professional development is for administrators. So the principals are going to be starting in June with their training. With teachers, we know that that learning is really important. We also know that it is going to be a big lift alongside a new curriculum. And so our plan at this point would be the beginning of next year for the professional learning to really be focused on what the new curriculum is, what the resources are, along with little drips of showing how that is connected to the science-aligned reading practices, with then the required professional development from Act 20 starting near the end of the year to layer on top of the resources that they have and really add that next layer of learning.
The bill also requires a reading readiness assessment, and that assessment will be selected by DPI. So there will just be one that everyone is required to use. The assessment has to be given to all kids in 4K through third grade. It must be given 2 times a year for 4K. We've been assessing kids in 4K 3 times a year, so we'll continue to do that so that we have a mid-year data point. And then it also requires students in kindergarten through third to be tested 3 times a year. That will start in fall 2024, and we should have what the assessment is by July of 2024. Previously, PALS was our universal screener or reading readiness assessment, and then this year we started using FastBridge for all students for our reading readiness screener. So we're eagerly awaiting the release of what that assessment will be. And then, based on that screener, all students who score below the 25th percentile in kindergarten through third grade will have a required personal reading plan. And prior to that reading plan being developed, we are required to do some diagnostic testing. So that is where we use the results from the screener to then narrow it in further to see which areas does a particular student need additional support and work on. And then that is what will funnel into the personal reading plan. The plan will outline different interventions or supports that student will receive. It doesn't require intervention, so just because a student has a personal reading plan doesn't mean that they have to be in a formal intervention, but they do have to have some type of support and monitoring to make sure that we're accelerating their growth over time. Earlier you heard about IEPs. IEPs and ILPs, so our language plans, can be the reading plan, but they have to include all of the components that are required in the personal reading plan. So we've got some alignment to do, there. Required parent notification is also a part of the plan, so parents will be notified, when that plan is put into place and what it includes, but then they'll also be notified about progress along the way. And that takes us to our next step. So tonight we also presented at the Curriculum Council. I think Melissa will be presenting at the Superintendent Advisory Council. And as she said earlier, our Act 20 team is now meeting weekly. We've been meeting throughout the year, but as more and more continues to come out and as next year continues to approach, we're meeting more often than we were before. And that's just to make sure that everything we're doing is systematic, tight, and aligned to everything that it needs to be that's in the bill. And then as DPI continues to release more information, we continue to kind of respond to that information that comes out.
And now it's your turn. What questions do you have for us?
Mrs. Kozlowski.
Thank you. This was an excellent presentation. It's very hard to break down the law. I did read Act 20. Actually, I read it several times prior.
Yes. That close reading strategy, yes.
Just to see when I was focusing or not. But I do want to talk a little bit in helping understand timeline for implementation. So we've already been building in structured changes back to phonics and going through all of that. So this, I understand, changes path a little bit. From a timeline, we are ready and set that effective. This is the program that is coming up for the fall of 2024. But then the professional development really doesn't seem to kick in until next year. Is that how I'm interpreting that?
Correct. So they've given us, the state has given some timelines, and we have to be able to prove we have to write a reading plan that has to be posted on our website, and we have to turn in every year to DPI starting next year. That talks about how our reading literacy program aligns to all those 9 areas. And we do not feel right now that our reading completely aligns to that. So we are already in process of wanting to look at that and go through review. With Act 20, it's moved us up some. And so we've done a lot of talking about just the load on teachers to do the requirement of the learning of Act 20 and the curriculum review or implementation would be really hard to do at the same time. One of those is just the amount of time that we have for professional development. The second is wanting to make sure we're honoring our teachers who are in the classrooms doing all this learning. So we are going to move forward with a new curricular resource depending our process coming here. So that will start next month. We'll be coming and talking about the curriculum review that we have been doing up to this date, all the resources that we looked at. And then the following month, we would bring forward what were the final two that we took to teachers and which one we are wanting to move forward. And then we'd come back in May, if things go forward, asking for an approval. And so then that new curricular resource, we'd be doing some, hopefully some training opportunities this summer. And then at the beginning of the school year, teachers would start that implementation. And then we would, at the end of the school year, we would first start that first initial training of the teacher learning requirement. And that would, those two things would continue on the next year.
Okay. So to break that down so that I get it, because there is a lot.
A lot.
We have gone down a path that we've already been moving towards this. We've also purchased curriculum to date, pre-Act 20.
Correct.
Are we looking at that as going to be potentially kind of shoved to the aside? Or,
So our current phonics and writing programs are with Benchmark. Benchmark has a comprehensive program called Advance. It is one of the programs that we have looked at, and it is one of the programs that's now in our final three. So we are still waiting to see which programs are on the state list. As Emily mentioned, you don't have to choose something from the state list, but if you are purchasing new curriculum, in order to get any amount of reimbursement from the state, it has to be on that list. And the state will reimburse a district up to 50%, but that's spread out with how many districts throughout the state also put in for reimbursement. So that's one of the reasons why we want to look at what is on the list, as well as we have taken the rubric that the state is using, and we're using that on top of ed reports and taking these curriculums through that same process that the state is doing.
okay. Last question. So based on all of that, and the fact that we have to have this implemented with the 9 steps this fall, how do we feel about that?
Well,
Maybe that was the wrong question. Are we going to be prepared? It's a tremendous amount between trying to either find that we are going to need to implement new curriculum. Professional development doesn't start for a year, so I'm going to put, again, new curriculum in and try to make sure that they understand the differences and changes in making sure we're hitting the milestones on these 9 steps. It's almost to me like the cart before the horse. That's where I think my questions are coming that I'm a little concerned on.
Well, and I feel like we've had this conversation a lot, and we shouldn't say it's not that no professional development is happening. The required professional development by Act 20 is like a specific program that has modules that you have to work through in a certain order, put out by certain companies, and you have to do that kind of all at one time. Our concern, if we start with that, and our current curriculum doesn't give teachers the resources that they need to do those things, we're gonna end up causing frustrations, because they're gonna have to be then creating a lot of things on their own to meet those requirements. And so we wanna start with the curriculum and have our professional development focused on, here's the new curriculum, here's how you do these things, while bringing in little drips of what they need to know about science-aligned practices to give meaning to, like, this is why this practice is this way, so that then when they start their required PD, it adds just another layer of teacher expertise that they've already been getting training in and working towards. It just isn't the required PD yet.
Perfect.
Does that make sense?
Very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Zenobia?
So, in going a little bit off of what Mrs. Kozlowski had mentioned, my initial question was how much of the 9 steps are we comfortable in saying that we're currently meeting or trying to get to? And I think you kind of alluded to that in your answer. It sounded like we're on our way, but there may be a few areas we're lacking.
Correct.
So then, off of what we just heard, of the benchmark curriculum, do we feel like that is currently working well for our students at that level? And, overall, I mean, we're already into it, so
Right.
are we hoping that that curriculum is going to fit this criteria at this point? Are we confident in
from-
that way?
I will answer this from a personal level, and then what I found so far from using the rubric that I have done. I have found it to benchmark to meet the requirement. I also am hoping that benchmark would meet the requirement because the phonics is exactly the same in the advanced, and the writing is a little different, but it would mean, and of course, we're going to have teachers a part of the process too of looking at these curriculums and showing things. But to me, best case scenario would be that, of course, benchmark would be what is selected. There's lots of reasons we feel like, it'd be one less thing. Teachers already know the program, the technology pieces behind that as well. So there are many pieces of it that would be the same and fill the holes of the areas that we feel we need to continue to make our shifts in.
So in hearing about maybe some of the reimbursement that we would get or not get from the state, in listening to the whole conversation, to me, in my mind, it is, what is the best curriculum, obviously, to teach kids to read, period. And I would hate to see some calculus go into a curriculum that, hey, we're going to get a reimbursement here, we're going to get some money if we go this route or that route versus what's already being done and implemented. So I think, from what I'm hearing, that's kind of the route we're obviously going, which is good. The couple of the other questions I had were just in, generally speaking, implementing Act 20, is there some sense of, now that we're maybe identifying reading problems within the student population, how will some of those things be addressed? Because I know that in some cases there's students that may have reading disabilities that maybe we can't fully serve in the system, meaning public education in general. So by having this implemented, as those problems are uncovered, what are, if any, strategies that we will try to employ to help those kids?
Another piece of the bill that we have to look at is also aligning our interventions. So through our multi-tiered systems of support, we will be making sure that we have interventions and supports that align to all of those 9 areas. So when we find a student's area that they have a discrepancy in, that we are able to intervene. And we always look at what is the level that we need to intervene. It may be that there's some additional supports in the classroom that need to happen. It might be that a child needs a full intervention, a couple days a week on top of what's happening at Strong Universal, that they need an additional piece, and we really zone in then on what that is. And so we're also looking at our intervention portfolio of resources and strategies that we have, so that we have all of those areas aligned. So if we find in that diagnostic assessment that a student, let's say, has an area that's indicating that their discrepancy is in the area of phonemic awareness, then here are the resources that we would go to intervene with. And so that's another piece of this puzzle that we're working on.
I would also just add that looking at the students' performance on a universal screener and then looking at what areas of reading they're doing well in or may need support in, and then intervening at some level and communicating with parents, that is already happening at our schools. This really gives us a little bit more structure to those 9 components and gives us a little bit of a tighter timeline for some of those pieces to happen. But those conversations are already happening at the school level. It's just really taking us to that next step. So it's not like this will be something completely new as we sit around and talk about student progress, how do we intervene, and when and how are we communicating with families?
Which we already do. We already have that system in place of interventions. What interventions we're providing. We provide parents with information on your child is in intervention, here's what we're intervening on, here's how we're monitoring that progress, and give them, updates on how the child is doing. This bill just adds some other layers to what we might have, some additional things that we might have to report out on or in an additional way. So it's kind of adding some layers to what we already are doing.
So the diagnostic test that we currently do will somewhat change, in your opinion, to meet? Or do you think it's currently sufficient?
We will, some of the diagnostic assessments that we will be using for the students of the universal screener would be different than diagnostic assessments that we would be doing if we're looking at a student with maybe a disability going towards seeing if a child might need an IEP or not. So we'll be putting together a list of what those diagnostic assessments will be for each of those 9 areas that we would need to do on a student, depending what our universal screener shows. And currently our universal screener is FastBridge, and the reason we moved to FastBridge this year is because PALS was retired last year. So we felt really good about the process that we had done in the district. Selecting FastBridge, we found some good information, but now we're in a place of, we don't know if FastBridge is going to be the universal screener assessment that's going to be selected by the state. And we have no control. We will have to use what the state chooses. So if the state, was to choose PALS, that can't be because it's retired. We would have to move towards that.
However, then the diagnostic assessments will be from like a recommended list. We don't have to choose diagnostics from the recommended list, but there will be one that's put out.
At some point.
And the bill does say the specific types of diagnostic tests, like rapid auto naming, for example, is one type of diagnostic test that must be included. So there's choices, but very tight guidelines on the types of diagnostic assessments that will have to be given to anyone who scores below the 25th percentile.
Okay, thank you.
Just maybe to share with the rest of the committee, so a couple weeks ago, the committee that was at the state level that was responsible for reviewing all of the different curricular recommendations met and really did not make a ton of progress. There was a lot of discussion. If you're a glutton for punishment, you would watch it like I did, and it was kind of fascinating just to hear the dialogue and some of the scoring criteria that they're using for these curriculum, which maybe aren't the most rigorous criteria. So while I think there's some progress being made towards some selection of curricular resources that will potentially be reimbursed, I still think that the mandate is clear in terms of what we're working toward and that we've got a lot of the building blocks in place. And while I don't necessarily want to leave the opportunity for some offset of that cost on the table, I think that we still just want to keep moving things forward with what we think is appropriate, because at the end of the day, it's about getting our kids to grade level and literate and, you know, being able to advance and, you know, waiting for these state level committees to make these decisions. You know, ultimately, again, it may affect the cost of the things that we acquire, but I think we have a lot of the building blocks in place. And I also, one of my favorite resources that we have is our elementary social studies program, because I think that really is nicely aligned to those comprehension goals over the K through 5. So I think that we've got the benchmark writer component, we've got the spelling, we've got the phonics, we've got all the pieces there. And if benchmark is the thing that we think we need to be complete with our students, and I think we really just need to have an honest conversation about that and not necessarily wait to see if the score on benchmark reading changes from 2.78 to 3.0, which is kind of where they're at right now. It's like, is it going to cross the line or not? Well, you know, based on the measurements that they're using, I don't know if that really is going to say that it's the right piece or not. I don't know. So I think we should consider what those costs and trade-offs are so that we can have a complete offering. And, you know, if we are fortunate enough to have the right screener and the right reading package, then that's a bonus.
That's wonderful feedback. Thank you.
Yes.
I would just like to thank the team that's here, but also behind the scenes, because all their planning is really, if this, then this, and if this, then this. And you heard of the timelines, and so they're really critically thinking about what is best for our students and our staff as we move forward. But we are moving forward together, so let's just do it. So thank you, guys.
Very well done.
It's really great work. Thank you so much. All right, the last thing on our agenda tonight is discussion and action on our summer school program.
All right. Well, I will give a little introduction. So tonight joining us is Mary Garcia Velez. You know that day in and day out, she is an elementary principal, but last year she really stepped into this role of really being our lead for summer school. As we work through policies and just changing and as Jody and I were working together, one of the things we wanted to be sure we did is bring forward our summer school program to the board for a review and potential approval. What you'll see and hear tonight is a little bit more about our historical summer school program that has been very successful. And then ultimately, Mary will be giving you a preview of the summer school program for coming up for this summer. What we'd like to do moving forward is always have this as a topic, most likely in January. And then we would realign our summer school planning timeline to ensure that we have courses and a complete program guide for summer school to bring to you in January. This year, since this is the first time in probably several years that we're bringing this forward, we were still waiting on some teacher course ideas for enrichment and that sort of thing. So that's why we are a little later, but in the future, we'd want to bring this every January. So with that little introduction, I'll turn it over to Mary. So Mary, thank you so much for being here. She's got the slide deck up and queued. So she'll share a little bit more about summer school, and then we can have conversation.
And hopefully we can think about summer, since it's supposed to be 50 later this week. So
Yes.
hopefully next year when we do this in January, it would also be 50 earlier.
Yes.
We'll see. So summer school this year, the dates are up there from June 17th to July 12th. That's the regular summer school. And then we have the Get Ahead, which is a little bit longer, that June 11th through the 19th. And we have the 4th and the 5th off. Those are the 4 schools that are different this year than last year. My school last year was getting work done in it. I've typically had it at Banting, but it's returning back to Banting. I was glad for the work that was done. Bethesda Hadfield, and then Horning will be the middle school and North. And then we, of course, will have courses that are virtual. So I have been doing summer school for maybe, 8 years or so. I don't even know how many years. But then slipped into this role in the middle of last year. And because I've done it for such a long time, it's just been kind of easy to slip into that. And then any person who's new who comes on board, I'm able to kind of walk them through how to do things. Tricia, for instance, Perez is somebody new that we hired this year at STEM. It's a new location at STEM. Liz Gould is returning from last year. So is Omar, who started for his first year last year. And then we have some really repeat people that are in our secondary locations. So our offerings at our elementary school are, we have our readiness courses. We have them in math and in literacy, and then that is both monolingual and dual language. And those are really for kids who are struggling a bit, and teachers make recommendations for those courses. I would say maybe 5 years back, parents were saying, okay, but if our students aren't struggling, we want to be in reading and math classes, what do you have? So we started offering them math and reading adventure classes. We have a variety of different enrichment classes that can be anything from arts and crafts. My music teacher's doing piano this year. We have cooking classes, a variety of different just fun classes. And then we have a kindergarten summer experience. So for kids who are 4K going into 5K, they can come and learn a little bit more about what it is to be in kindergarten. And we have at one location intensive special ed. That's at the elementary level. Then a couple of other opportunities that are really offered off-site is that EB Shirts, which is always full, and the Waukesha Summer Drama Academy, that is grades 1 through 12. Really for all grade levels, we have this Jump Start. Kids that are in kindergarten, in 4-year-old kindergarten and 5-year-old kindergarten to come into the school, we have Jump Start. You'll also see that at the middle school level. That's in August. In middle school, again, we have those readiness courses, but then our courses that are fun in math and reading are there as well. The Club for Literacy and Math Madness for Math. And then also a variety of enrichment courses in middle school. High school has credit recovery in various subjects. And then there's also the Get Ahead courses for students who want to get a jump on the year. The enrichment courses on the right-hand side are really what we offer at the high school level: the art, marching band, the speed, strength, and agility training, and then the drama. And then that drama is really a great opportunity, K-12. And then we have the Jump Start for middle school. This just gives you a little bit of a view of the schedule and what's taking place. At all elementary sites, there will also be breakfast. So kids will come in, they'll be able to have actually elementary, middle, and high. Anybody who's 18 or younger can have free breakfast, whether you're attending summer school or not. So community members can come in and have breakfast as well. Our registration is going to be March 20th through April 12th. And all the registration will be on Infinite Campus. Something new this year, right after someone registers, they're going to be able to see that we received their selections. It doesn't necessarily mean you get all the selections, because they'll take what's their first choice and what's their second, but you'll receive an email right away, so that will be really very convenient for parents. And then these are just our fun facts. 447 summer school offerings. Now, I just want to say that if we were offering arts and crafts at Summit View and arts and crafts at Banting, that would count for 2 offerings. Total credits earned, this was last year, was 426. 31 students attended for North's High School Credit Recovery. 383 students attended virtual Get Ahead. That's a lot of kids online. 2,142 students were served last year in some of our offerings. And we had 51 non-resident students that attended. Along with that, of course, as I said, we had the breakfast and lunch. So it's really a great opportunity for kids to continue some type of activity during the summer at a variety of different levels and a variety of different experiences. That's really all I have for you. Any questions?
Maybe before, if there's any questions, I know there's an action tonight because we have to approve the proposal for the locations and the offerings. Is there anything else that the committee needs to know about what the action is, the requested action?
No, just what I shared earlier, that in the future, we would like to bring this a little bit earlier. But I think bringing this forward now, if this is approved, we will then continue on our communication path and ensuring that families are aware of the registration timelines, the locations, this actually came up at our parent superintendent advisory of what buildings, it will be at. So that's just it, that we would like to do this in the future a little bit earlier, but we're here tonight, and we think we have some great course offerings like we have in the past.
Questions? I'm not seeing any.
Great,
It's exciting. There's so much happening in the summertime.
thanks.
All right. So we would be, yeah, oh, are you pointing? Or you're raising your hand? Okay, Mrs. Kozlowski.
I would love to have questions for you, but it was really great. It's exciting to see, and I enjoy seeing how well-oiled it seems to work and move along. So I motion to approve the 2024 summer school program as presented.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Mrs. Koenig. I'm not anticipating any further discussion, just given where we left things. All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, passes 5-0.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mary, for your leadership with this. It's been really helpful to help us move forward as a system and really bring in potential new administrators to that role. So thank you.
Great, thanks.
Great, thank you very much. All right, just as a reminder, we'll report out on all of these topics next week at our regular board meeting, which is Wednesday, February 14th at 7 p.m. Are there any recommendations for future meetings? I know we've got a good plan for the agenda going forward over the next couple months, so we'll keep that moving. Our next meeting is Tuesday, March 5th. Our next Teaching and Learning Committee meeting will be Tuesday, March 5th at 7 p.m. here in the boardroom. And with that, we're adjourned. Thank you. Good night, everybody.